This boy was thrown into the river by his father the moment he was born. No matter how desperately he struggled, no one dared to help him. It turned out this was the trial of the Baskerville family. As soon as a new life is born, they are cast into the cradle of blades in the forest of nightmares. They must traverse on foot the trial path, studded with sharp swords, to reach the other side and undergo the awakening of their innate talents. In my past life, I was the mightiest hound of the family, having once single-handedly repelled the invasion of the demon clan. Yet just as I returned in triumph, ready to receive my honors, my father personally sent me to the guillotine, simply because my power threatened his position, and I had uncovered secrets I should never have known. In the end, I was falsely accused of colluding with the demon clan and met a gruesome death at the height of the family's glory. Now, reborn, I think of nothing but revenge. Though I am currently only an infant, I have a chance to gain power ahead of time. Legend has it that any child who bathes in the waters of the Ming River will gain a body as strong as steel. In my previous life, because I was a bastard, I was ostracized by my full brothers, and never obtained this power. This time, I will be the first to arrive, and claim all the power bestowed by the Ming River for myself. As the river water continuously stings my wounds, not only do I feel no pain, but I also sense an endless stream of power surging into my body. Merely by arriving a few minutes ahead of the others, such a dramatic transformation had already taken place. To absorb the power more quickly, I guzzled down over 10 pounds of the river's water. Even though I was now in a state of drowning, as long as a single thread of my consciousness remained, I would never surface easily. 40 minutes passed in a flash. My father on the shore wore the serene smile of a sage. It was as if he were seeing his younger self. But the attendants beside him grew restless, fearing that the slightest misstep might cause me to drown in it. They kept urging the family head to pull me out immediately. It was only then that my father realized he absolutely could not let this once-in-a-century prodigy slip away. So he shouted, "You can come up now." When I didn't respond in time, he immediately reached out and yanked me out. Seeing this, my father wore a wicked grin. "Truly the child of Hugo, even though you've lost consciousness, you've still seized all the power of the Milky Way water power." Next, he would witness the birth of another version of himself. But my ultimate goal was never to become a baby like him. What I intended to do was destroy my own family with my own hands, and wipe the Baskervilles from the pages of history. When I awoke again, I had been returned to the nursery. Little did I know that an unknown danger was slowly creeping closer to me. A maid approached me, carrying a treasure chest. Yet she said nothing. She simply placed the chest on the bed and left the room. Curious, I examined it, wondering what could possibly be inside. But to my surprise, the chest opened on its own, and 2 venomous snakes with gaping blood-red mouths slithered out. It seemed someone, jealous of my talents, intended to kill me before I could grow up. But my fate is in my own hands, not in the heavens. Having not yet fulfilled my mission of vengeance, I would not fall so easily. Facing the fierce assault, I felt not a shred of fear. Instead, I clamped my hands tightly around their 7-inch vital points and, using the steel fangs grown from the Ming River water, tore them apart, bite by bite, as if they were spicy snacks. Morning soon arrived. The servants who had originally come to collect my remains were all driven away by the sight before them. For not only had I not been killed by the venomous snakes, but I had remained completely unharmed, spending the entire night with their mangled bodies. From that day on, all the attendants who cared for the infants in the nursery were executed. As for who had ordered them to act against the head of the household, the truth remains unknown to this day. Only I, the still growing hound, saw through the entire truth. In the blink of an eye, 8 years have passed. I have now entered the stage of formal training. Although I have already experienced all of this once before, upon hearing that my father, at the same age, had already reached the level of a master, I still felt a tinge of pressure. It seems I must regain the power I possessed in my past life before adulthood arrives. After undergoing the baptism of Minhe, I not only gained a resilient physique, but also intellect surpassing that of Einstein at his peak. Moreover, I was able to control 2 venomous snakes from the moment I was born. Consequently, I am regarded as a monster within the family. The 3 blonde-haired youths beside me are the very ones who have long subjected me to violence. Whenever class ends, they behave as if I were their older brother, punching and kicking me. According to my past life memories, when they grow up, they'll be known as the 3 prongs of Baskerville, and my death will be directly linked to them. It was they who slandered me, accusing me of colluding with the demon's mouth, and pinned a crime on me that I never committed. To ensure these 3 won't interfere with my life 10 years from now, it seems I absolutely cannot tolerate this any longer today. Just then, Big Hair pointed a finger at me. He'd heard that I'd spent over 40 minutes in the Ming River, so he wanted to verify it himself. He then called Sun Mao over and Together they covered my mouth and nose, saying they'd let me off if I could hold my breath for 7 minutes. They say children are even more cruel, and that saying certainly holds true. Well, I'll just play along with them for a bit. Yet the two before me were still gloating, because they simply didn't believe a human hold their breath that long. As the 7 minutes ticked by, their expressions grew increasingly grim. It wasn't until 20 minutes had passed that they realized they'd truly picked the wrong person. But just as they decided to let me go, how could I let this slide so easily? So I bit off Sanmao's finger in one go, then warned the other two. Today everyone must leave a part of their body behind, or else there will be no good outcome. Damao Tingbo was instantly enraged. He grabbed a pen and lunged at me, but I didn't even bother to dodge. I wanted to show him exactly what the Ming River had given me, a body of steel. My eyes blazed with ferocity. All right then, let's have some fun, I said. I immediately slammed a fist into Damao's face. Jian-shaped Ermao tried to avenge his two comrades, but before he could even swing his hand, my foot had already sent him a massive kick to the groin. Seeing that all three were now powerless to fight back, I picked up my opponent and tossed him at their feet, saying, I'll give you a chance to reform. As for who wins, that's for you to decide. After exchanging glances, the three began a brutal, inhuman slaughter of one another. I didn't know what happened during that time, only that in the days that followed, the so-called Baskerville Trident would exist. In this world, children in this world are ruthlessly thrown into the water the moment they are born. Only a small fraction survive. Those who are chosen will receive the power bestowed by the River of Light. It turns out this is the Baskerville family's tradition. But the prerequisite is that one must crawl barehanded through a cradle of blades studded with swords to earn the right to bathe in the River of Light. In my previous life, because I was far too powerful, I was accused by the so-called Trident, accused of colluding with the demon clan, and ultimately sent to the guillotine by my own father. Now, reborn, I not only greedily drained the bright river dry, but also displayed unprecedented talent even in infancy to prevent the tragedy from recurring. I completely dismantled the Trident trio at the age of 8. However, the butler soon reported this matter to the head of the family. Originally, he had intended only to report my sweeping victories in all the competitions, but when he mentioned the practical combat test, scheduled for 5 days later, he was compelled to reveal the altercation that had occurred between me and the other young masters. Even though the 3 injured boys had received treatment and their bodies had fully recovered, their spirits had suffered a severe blow. From that moment on, not only did the 3 of them remain silent and uneasy whenever they met, but their personalities also shifted from their original arrogance to timidity. The head of the household was deeply shocked that I had fought 3 opponents at once and held my own against them. He immediately summoned the butler to call me in, then asked if I had crippled the triplets. I gave an affirmative answer. According to information I received from the priest, they had received proper treatment after losing limbs. Originally, my father had high hopes for the 3 brothers. As they were unleashed their martial arts, they were the cream of the crop among their peers. But now that things had reached this point, my father believed I should reflect on the harm I had done to my elder brothers. Upon hearing this, my expression darkened instantly. The fact that I could overwhelm all 3 of them single-handedly only proved my superior strength. After all, forgiveness is merely an excuse for the weak, who lack the power to exact revenge. My father was quite satisfied with my answer. The strong reign supreme, while the weak are guilty. This is also the family rule of the Baskerville clan. To reward me, father ordered the butler to take me to the temporary storeroom to pick out whatever food I liked. Before leaving, father also warned me that I must not lose to suffocation in a live combat 5 days later. But what I want to say is that the possibility of losing simply does not exist. The scene shifts. I arrived at the grain storage warehouse. Upon learning that I wanted chocolate, the butler immediately had the chef bring the finest variety. However, what I said next left everyone present utterly baffled. I told them I didn't want the finished product, but rather raw cocoa beans, and specifically the most bitter variety. They had never heard of such a way of eating them, but the chef still complied with my request and brought the most intense blood beans. A single bean of this variety could produce 100 liters of chocolate. After tasting it, I found it bitter and it was simply not something a human could stomach. As for my reason, of course, it wasn't for consumption, but to use this blood bean to assist me in hunting monsters during the practical test 5 days later. As for what would happen that day, it would be an unprecedented, momentous event in Baskerville history. Time quickly passed, and the day of the practical test arrived. Baskerville Love served as the chief examiner. He stated that this assessment was simple. One only needed to wait a full month in the Crimson Blacklands. Enlist powerful monsters. The base score for survival is 10 points for everyone, while death yields 0 points. If you manage to seize any trainee's badge, you'll receive bonus points. At this point, Love mentioned the restricted areas of the Crimson Blacklands. He advised everyone to stay within the designated zones. As the bell in his hand rang, the practical evaluation officially began. Drawing on my past life memories, I naturally knew which terrain offered the greatest advantage. Soon, some trainees began recklessly attacking their own brothers. What they didn't know was that the reason so many instructors had been summoned was actually to minimize casualties as much as possible. If they indiscriminately killed innocents, even if they seized an opponent's badge, they would be penalized. At the same time, an instructor followed me to the edge of the zone, just 100 meters. Originally, he had intended to witness the true strength of a prodigy, but to his surprise, while everyone else was swinging their swords to hunt monsters, I was leisurely lounging in the shade, doing nothing. This series of actions made the instructor wonder what exactly I was here for, and whether the rumors about me being a prodigy were true or false. Little did he know that everything I was doing was merely a facade. Finally, after observing me for a week, the instructor concluded that I was simply hiding here, doing nothing, and saw no point in watching me any longer. He decided to return for the time being to report the situation. As soon as the meddlesome man left, I pulled out a handful of beans and tossed them into the fire. In my previous life, my subordinates had told me that cocoa beans could mask the smell of blood, and blood beans were particularly effective. After setting up hundreds of traps around the area, the hunt officially began. And so, I stepped into the restricted zone of the Crimson Blacklands. From the branches all around, I was certain that what I sought was right here. Just then, my eyes suddenly lit up. There, on the ground, was a pile of fresh feces. There is only one kind of monster capable of producing such a thing, the Hellhound, classified as a BG danger level. Facing such a terrifying monster, I knew full well that, even in my previous life, at the age of 18, I could not defeat it alone. Yet now, at only 8 years old, I felt not the slightest bit of, because I know the Hellhound's 3 weaknesses. The first weakness, that it can only charge in a straight line. As long as I use my evasion skill effectively, I can constantly drain its stamina. Next, I took out a bottle and splashed water on the ground. This exploits the Hellhound's second weakness. Regardless of the water's depth, they will always avoid it upon sight. This tactic can severely restrict the Hellhound's movement. And the final, most fatal weakness. For all canines, chocolate is highly toxic. Once it's forced into the Hellhound's body, all I have to do is wait for the poison to take effect. After all, a single blood blister can yield 100 liters of chocolate. However, the Hellhound's anatomy is unique. Its hard ribs constantly protect its heart, so there's only one way to take it down. Target its lower body, and smash its kidneys. A wisp of blue essence emanated from the monster's body. The very energy gained from slaying monsters, capable of strengthening the body. At this rate, regaining my former strength before reaching adulthood is by no means a pipe dream. Now at the age of 8, I have defeated the Hellhound of BG Jaibe. In this practical test, I am certain to take first place. But just then, 4 more Hellhounds appeared behind me. Seeing this, I immediately swung my sword and severed the head of the one I'd just defeated, warning them that I was not to be trifled with. After I did this, fear flashed across the faces of the 4 Hellhounds. They even lowered their heads and began retreating. It was only then that I realized something was amiss. After all, Hellhounds are the epitome of pride among canines. It was. They would never react this way. I immediately turned to look. And there, behind me, stood a 3-headed dog shrouded in the stench of hell. Cerberus, the hound of the underworld. This 3-headed husky, a servant of Hades, possessed the same fatal weakness as any ordinary dog. If he ate chocolate, he would instantly fall into poisoning. Just moments ago, I had arrived at the Crimson Black hunting grounds, but unexpectedly, I encountered a Class A monster, Cerberus, although he was severely wounded at the moment. Even the Hellhound of Bagaki, after sensing him, could only bow its head in awe. Right now, I was constantly calming my nerves. As long as I could hunt down the Cerberus, the power of mythopower of my past life will be one step closer. So I mustered my courage, swung my sword, and launched the first attack against the monster. Just as I thought I was about to land a solid hit on his head, Cerberus counterattacked from the side with lightning-fast speed. Fortunately, my reflexes remain as sharp as ever, and I dodged his fierce assault from the rear. It seems that even though he's wounded, his combat prowess hasn't diminished much. In my past life, I could easily crush Cerberus, in my past life, and I can do the same in this one. But in the very next second, my sword was actually bitten to pieces by him, and while I was stunned, my body was sent flying by his massive paw. Only then did I truly realize the gap in our strength. For an 8-year-old like me, challenging Cerberus is still premature, even with the steel-like body of Meihua and Shiyu. After taking the brunt of his attacks, my internal organs were nearly shattered. As the monster closed in, I kept reminding myself, I absolutely must not lose consciousness. Suddenly, Cerberus opened its blood-stained jaws and lunged at me. Snapping back to my senses, I dodged immediately. Otherwise, the tree behind me, now torn to shreds, would have been me. You guessed it. I immediately ran toward the iron cage ahead. As long as I got past him, I could find a way to defeat Cerberus. Because at my original resting spot, I had already set up a perfect hunting trap. Seeing the monster had fallen into my trap, I took a single step and leaped over the first trap, with the distance between me and the monster's gaping maw less than 0.001 millimeters. Finally, as it landed, it triggered the trap, and countless blades pierced its body. Soon, the blood-tainted water applied to the blades took effect. The 2 dog heads on either side of the monster were the first to die from poisoning. It seemed the central head was the key to supporting its body. I grasped a long feather, channeled my magic into it, and then hurled it forward at a speed of 180 miles per hour. Finally, after the long hair, it took only 7 steps for the poison to reach his heart, and he collapsed to the ground. It seems the legend of the 7-step snake is indeed true. Once bitten, one is doomed within 7 steps. After absorbing the energy from Cerberus's body, I decided to head to a certain place. Since Cerberus was the guardian of the domain, there must be a dungeon nearby that he protected. Although, monsters, it is a mysterious place hiding countless rare treasures. Next, I took Cerberus's saliva and smeared it on my body to mask my scent and leverage the hellhound status within the Crimson Black Forest to ward off ambushes from other monsters. Following Cerberus's original path, I soon found the dungeon hidden deep within. Not only did the air here reek of death, but even the decaying ground was imbued with an eerie magic. It seemed this dungeon had not yet been discovered by others. Having finished my reconnaissance, I steeled myself and stepped into the cavern, aware that unknown dangers might strike, or perhaps mysterious treasures awaited my claim. Once inside the dim cavern, I found it strewn with red minerals. Clearly, this place was connected to Red Cone Mountain. But just then, from Thea, blinding beam of light shot toward me. I concluded that must be the dungeon's location. Sure enough, just as I expected, a ruby radiating magical power suddenly appeared inside. My gaze was then drawn to a skeleton on the ground. I picked up the letter that had fallen there. This person, too, belonged to the Baskerville family. He had written this letter to warn future generations not to repeat the same mistake he had made. One day, he and his younger brother went out hunting, but accidentally stumbled upon this bottomless cave. They also discovered that this was a dungeon hiding a treasure, so they killed all the monsters guarding the place. But deciphering the treasure cipher took them a full 3 years. Before entering the dungeon, there was one person. After entering, there were 2, and upon exiting, there was one again. Therefore, the conclusion they reached was based on the fact that were identical twins. In their mother's womb, they were considered one person. When they entered the dungeon together, they were indeed 2 people. To ensure that only one emerged, they had to kill each other. Although he took his brother's phone and claimed victory, the ruby remained unchanged. In the end, unable to accept this reality, he chose to abandon the treasure and retreat to the mountains, convinced that the dungeon had been. After reading this, I was utterly speechless. If that were true, then since I have no twin siblings, wouldn't that mean I'd be unable to decipher the cipher? It's pure nonsense. In my past life, there was no dungeon I couldn't conquer. Just then, the contrast between the bright light and the darkness gave me a clue. This explained why the first half of the cave was dim. So the answer to this cipher is shadow. Immediately, he shattered the ruby before me with a single punch. What emerged from it was none other than the Teoti, a sword said to exist only in fairy tales. It is said to be a demonic sword forged from the body of the greed demon. Originally, people believed it was merely a legend and lacked the resources to search for it. It wasn't until the demon clan discovered this sword that humanity realized the impending crisis. But in this life, since I discovered the Teoti first, the demon clan's combat strength will be greatly reduced. Suddenly, the Teoti transformed into energy and surged into my right hand. In an instant, my muscles began to grow back from within my body. I couldn't imagine just how strong I had become. But before I could celebrate for long, an intense hunger began to plague my thoughts. I guessed it was most likely the ghost of Teuti Island. After all, he hasn't eaten for over 100 years. Once I stepped out of the cave, Teuti actually led me, running swiftly in a certain direction. Sure enough, he had spotted the B-rank hellhound I'd hunted. I watched as the fitness blade instantly pierced the monster's body. As it absorbed the energy, my dizziness gradually faded. After the absorption was complete, I actually gained this hellhound skill, the blood rage effect. Even the slightest wound could cause the enemy's blood to spurt out continuously. Moreover, there were still 2 skill slots remaining. It seems this is an innate ability possessed by demons, the ability to absorb others' skills and make them their own. In this world, 99% of the weapons in this world possess human consciousness. Not only do they need to parasitize living beings to survive, but they even experience hunger, simply because they are forged from demonic bodies. And the weapon currently connected to my right hand is the most powerful of the demon swords, Tao Tai. Its innate ability allows it to randomly replicate one of the opponent's skills by consuming their vital essence. Therefore, after absorbing the hellhound, I acquired its bloodburst skill. Even with the smallest window, this skill causes opponents to continuously bleed out. Immediately afterward, the greedy monster turned its sights on Cerberus. But what troubled me wasn't the fear of drawing a useless skill. It was my desire to use an A-grade monster to claim first place in the practical test. After the monster had its fill, I acquired Cerberus's burn skill. However, the FG high-speed regeneration from number 3 Kaowei caught my attention. It was then that I realized, the moment Cerberus fell, he had crushed an Egyptian sewer rat beneath him. Now, with my steel drive paired with high-speed regeneration backing me up, it was practically a match made in heaven. Soon a month had passed, and the practical test came to a close. With almost no casualties, every trainee was able to hunt various C-rank or lower monsters. As a reward, they were all given appropriate weapons and equipment. However, the massive monster lying nearby stunned all the instructors. In just 2.5 years, an 8-year-old child born in a thatched cottage had managed to hunt down a monster that 3 adults couldn't even kill. Word of this soon reached the head of the family. This was an event that completely overturned the history of the Baskerville family. Afterward, my father summoned me, and asked how I had managed to kill Cerberus. I replied with confidence, "For canines, chocolate is the deadliest poison. Even the most concentrated blood bean is enough to kill Cerberus instantly." My father listened without a hint of doubt, and even decided to grant me a wish. It seemed that this time, I finally had the chance to get everything I wanted. I immediately told my father that I wished to study in the family stove study, though I was prepared for rejection. After all, I was not a legitimate heir but a bastard, something that, throughout the family's history, would never have been permitted. Yet the outcome surprised me. Not only did my father not refuse me, but he even recommended books from the 6th realm. At that moment, I began to wonder if reincarnation could truly change a person's character. In my previous life, a bastard could only cultivate up to the 4th realm. However, I shouldn't celebrate too soon. Currently, my father's cultivation had reached the 7th realm, and by the time I was executed, he had even attained to the 9th realm. But this time, I will absolutely surpass my father's peak, for I know of a forgotten, forbidden book. Once I master its contents, I will break through directly to the 10th realm. Afterward, I arrived at the Library of Good Fortune. Every book here was something I could only dream of in my past life. Yet now before my eyes lay the very book my father had recommended for me to study, the 6th realm. But I didn't care about it at all, because my purpose in coming here was this forgotten book, The Hidden Pursuit. It was written by the first ruler of the Baskerville clan. Not only does it document the foundational cultivation techniques of the 1st through 9th realms, but it even teaches the long-lost 10th realm. As for why no one has been able to master it, it's because 7 pages of its content are missing. In my past life, when I discovered the first page, my father became obsessed with the 10th insight. To find the remaining 6 pages and break through his own limits, he unleashed all of the Grey Clan's forces and declared war on other clans. Ultimately, after sacrificing most of his troops, he gathered all 7 pages, but he never found the book to match them. Now, having been reborn, I have deeply committed those 7 pages to memory. With them, I will break through the 4th insight and cultivate to a realm no one in the clan has ever reached. After reading the entire book, I entered a meditative state. In the realm of the mind, I attempted to unleash the 5th insight against an imagined enemy. Perhaps because my past self had endured inhuman treatment, I succeeded in breaking through my limits on the very first try. In that moment, I was overjoyed. I could clearly feel my magical power had increased. A realm that my past self had failed to reach even after 30 years. I had achieved in this life at the age of just 8. Now, I have advanced from a sword expert to a master of the lowest rank. I will now be able to control my magical power with greater freedom. It seems I will have more than enough time to restore my past life strength before my coming-of-age ceremony at 15. Next, I took a magnifying glass from my pocket and used the principle of light focusing to ignite the latent pursuit. Thus, in this world, I alone will be able to break through the terrain traps. But just then, the guards, smelling the scent of burning, and immediately ran upstairs. I scratched my head and explained that I had accidentally burned a book of little value. Upon hearing this, the two of them breathed a sigh of relief. If I had burned a relatively important book, even pledging 3 generations of their lives as collateral wouldn't have been enough. The scene shifted, and I arrived at my father's room, telling him that I was studying to become an internet celebrity, and could now feel a burning sensation within my body. Upon hearing this, my father and the butler froze, because this meant I had entered the realm of insight. Of course, this wasn't my true strength to test my current level. My father arranged a duel against a Class C beastman that had been starving for 2.5 months. The audience held their breath. After all, for an 8-year-old, this was far beyond what he could handle. But to everyone's surprise, the moment the beastman was released from its chains and began to roar, I darted toward it with lightning speed and severed one of its arms. Due to the influence of the B-rank Hellhound's blood rage skill, even with its rapid regeneration, the beast was helpless, seeing the terror in its eyes. It likely never imagined, even in death, why its regeneration had failed. With a sweep of my hand, a crimson magical energy enveloped the blade, and a single thrust instantly ended the orc's life. This time, Father could no longer sit idly by. From my initial performance to my instant kill of a C-rank demon, I was undoubtedly a once-in-a-millennium genius. At just 8 years old, I had already mastered the first sword mark. Sword form. Smiling, I said to Father, "The orc seems too weak. Please arrange a more challenging duel for me." I had originally thought that by flaunting my abilities like this, Father would send me to a specialized school for further training. But unexpectedly, he actually consulted the butler about a monster captured 10 days prior, a bloodthirsty, Imperial-class troll, and declared it would be my next opponent. In this world, 99% of the weapons possess human consciousness, simply because this is a world overrun by monsters, and for humans to defeat monsters, they must utilize their bodies to create weapons powerful enough to stand against them. That day, to test my strength, my father used the monster he had just hunted as a test subject. But unexpectedly, even at the age of 8, I managed to kill the C-rank beastman without the slightest effort. So, I challenged my father to face a stronger monster. Originally, I intended to show off, so he'd send me to a specialized academy. But to my surprise, he brought out the real deal. A secret class troll that had gone without food for 2.5 years. As soon as the chains restraining the mushroom were broken, the battle erupted. Relying on my agile footwork, I kept dodging its ferocious attacks, yet I repeatedly chose not to counterattack. I knew that a B-class troll possessed an absurdly powerful ability regeneration. If I couldn't deal a fatal blow, any attack would be pointless. That's why hunting a troll requires a meticulous plan. Though I'd found its fatal weakness, I was now faced with another dilemma. Just how much of my true power should I unleash to instantly kill the troll without arousing my father's suspicion? Just then, a sudden idea struck me. What if I staged a fake animal battle instead of the monster immediately? I could not only shake off my father's suspicion, but also legitimately demonstrate my true strength. In the blink of an eye, the troll charged at me again. This time, I didn't dodge. Instead, I unleashed the first sword mark of Baskerville, slashing a massive gash across its shoulder. Just as the troll's wound was about to heal, I let out a loud roar to draw the attention of everyone and my father's attention. I finally realized, next, I would attempt to kill this ogre in an instant. If I failed, I would give up. A murderous intent filled my eyes as I channeled my magic into my body, all to make it seem, at that very moment, as though I had already mastered the second sword mark. Just as I had anticipated, the force of the strike sliced through the ogre's thick hide, cleaving its head from its body. Under the incredulous stares of the crowd, I, with the air of a prodigy, gave them a new perspective. In the days that followed, because my strength was so overwhelming, students my age, and even seniors older than me, dared not get too close to me. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that my father was utterly astonished by my performance. Don't mistake the strength I've displayed now as merely that of an ultimate expert at the Foundation realm. In fact, with my current strength, I have already grasped the 5th ship class, and with the super powerful projectile attack I just acquired, I was in no way inferior to a low-level master. Just then, the triplets I'd bullied earlier found me. I thought they were coming to settle the score, but to my surprise, it was because I looked so cool while slaying monsters. The 3 of them had become my loyal fans. Goosebumps instantly covered my entire body, recalling that in my past life it was because of them that I was killed. To beat them up, right then and there. However, just as I was about to give them another beating, the butler found me and told me what my father had instructed me to do. Meanwhile, the head of the Baskerville family and the deputy head of the Mogg family, Adolf, were discussing how to organize this year's joint training. Although relations between the 2 great families were not exactly harmonious, there was once an emperor who said this: "The Baskervilles are the family of the sword, and the Mogg family is magic. At the very least, the way of the sword and magic should be complementary. Only then can the nation break through its current peak. From that point on, every year, any child between the ages of 8 to 15 years old, they must participate in the joint training of the 2 great families." At this point, Adolf inquired, "I hear a prodigy of unparalleled talent has been born into your Baskerville family. As it happens, we Moggs have one as well." He then summoned his niece, Camo. This is a world where everyone uses magic, yet there exists a single family with absolutely no magical aptitude. Whether in duels or monster hunts, they must rely solely on brute force, and they must immerse themselves in sword training for 25 hours a day. Over time, the empire has divided into 2 factions. The Mogg family, renowned for their magic, and the Baskerville family, famous for their martial prowess. At this moment, the heads of the 2 great families were boasting about their respective clans, once-in-a-century prodigies. Adolf took the initiative and summoned his family's prodigy, Camo, who was also his most beloved niece. But he had already planned his strategy. Knowing his niece's fiery temper, he intended to use it to put pressure on the Baskerville clan leader, Hugo. Without a second thought for their familial ties, Camo unleashed a barrage of verbal attacks on Hugo. "You shameless mine thief! Give back the ruby mine that belongs to us." It turned out that the root cause of the conflict between the 2 great clans, the mining rights to the ruby mine. Seeing this, Adolf feigned concern and tried to reason with his niece, telling she shouldn't speak to others that way. Fortunately, Hugo wasn't offended. He simply viewed it as a child's one-sided scolding. But Camo refused to back down. As a magical prodigy, he insisted he needed a sufficient supply of rubies for his magical experiments. Adolf hurriedly stopped him from continuing the confrontation, for a ferocious beast was struggling to suppress the rage within. Just then, a single sentence broke the tense standoff. "What does not belong to you can never be changed." I entered the room with the butler in tow. Upon seeing me, Adolf began to size up my strength, only to realize his own children had already left their seats. Camo demanded, "On what grounds did you dare say that just now? The ruby mine itself is bound to the magical family." I was utterly astonished, for the girl standing before me was none other than the most powerful mage 20 years in the future, one who would even wield influence over the royal family, be revered by the world as the authoritative goddess of fire. So I mocked him, had traveled all this way to our territory just to throw a tantrum. Camo was instantly enraged, and immediately freezing magic coalesced in his hands. At first, I thought he wanted to spar with me, but to my surprise, he was merely reconstructing the geographical boundaries between the 2 great families. The spot Com pointed to lay precisely on the border between the 2 cities, the site of the ruby mine. He explained that a portion of the ore rightfully belonged to the Mogg family, and that the Baskerville family had no right to claim it all for themselves. I, however, told him that rubies were worth less than scrap metal to us. Our ultimate goal in mining them was to expand our territory. Com decided to visually demonstrate who truly deserved to be the Ruby King. He extended his hand from their family's territory into the Baskerville lands, implying that the Mogg family was the strongest. I immediately grabbed Cam's hand and pulled a small knife from my pocket. "Anyone who dares to encroach on our territory will be killed without mercy." But just as the blade was about to make contact, I knew Adolf would intervene. So I released my grip and explained that a blade was merely a toy to the Iron Sword family, utterly incapable of causing harm. Afterward, I apologized to Adolf and the others, and my father suggested we return to the main topic, this year's joint training for the prodigies of the 2 great families. The scene shifted, and Cam and I found ourselves standing on the arena. As the bell rang to signal the start of the match, Cam immediately raised his hand and began chanting the living magic incantation, lightning spells, and tactical spells. Seeing these three types of magic coming at me simultaneously, I mocked him, saying he'd better focus on just one thing. Immediately, I used agile footwork to dodge each one, slapping them hard in the face, a face they thought was that of a genius capable of wielding multiple spells. Suddenly, Cam cast an earth shield spell, and a wall of earth rose up from the ground. But unexpectedly, I shattered it with a single punch. It couldn't my advance. But to avoid harming the future's greatest mage, I merely tapped him lightly on the head. The gap in our strength was already glaringly obvious. Yet Kamu still refused to admit defeat. He immediately summoned 2 more earthen walls. Frankly, magic of this caliber was an insult to human intelligence. Simply circling around them would have solved the problem easily. To spare his pride, I decided to play the part of the most dedicated actor, and held back my power. After withstanding my attack, the 2 earthen walls were pierced with a small hole. I then fired another finger snap at his forehead. Yet even with the outcome clear, Tamu still unleashed a fire spell at me. I suppose this is why he became the revered female fire god. Stubborn, proud, and never one to give up easily. Just then, I heard a voice from behind me, a conversation from the arena. I didn't press my attack but stepped back. The very next second, a massive fireball spell suddenly appeared behind me. This was the strategy I'd devised to make the match a draw, ensuring there was no overwhelming display of power. After the fireball struck both of us, Kamui's clothes were burned away, leaving only the essentials. So I took off my own shirt and gave it to him. The outcome of the duel was exactly as I'd anticipated. Due to unavoidable, our duel was ruled a draw. But I believe that at that moment, everyone would have considered Baskerville the winner. Yet on the way back, my father still criticized me because I hadn't wielded my power at all, showing mercy on the battlefield. But this is a cardinal sin for him, whether it's a woman or a relative. Anyone who poses a threat to him must be struck down. At that moment, I was suddenly startled. In my past life, after my father's first wife died, he had treated me, his illegitimate son, with utter indifference. I might even say he treated me like discarded trash. I told him I was devising another plan. After all, the Baskervilles' priority was expanding our lands. Yet the borders of the Crimson Black Lands and the Red Island Quarry had long been under threat from the Manchu and the Hellhounds. If we could enlist the power of the Mog family, we could minimize the losses incurred while expanding our territory. My father was quite pleased with my plan, though he did not know that I had actually proposed this first, based on memories from my past life. By the time we reached the corner, Adolf had found us again. He knew full well that the Baskervilles' power far surpassed that of the Mog family, so he decided to resolve the land and ruby mine issues peacefully. He proposed a cross-family marriage, arranging for the Baskervilles' eldest son to become engaged to their prodigy, Kamu. No sooner had the words left his mouth than Wamo rejected Ad. He refused to marry someone 17 years his senior. If he were to become engaged, it would have to be to someone of a similar age whose abilities he recognized. I suspected he was referring to me, because ever since entering the room, his gaze hadn't left me. At the same time, Adolf had also guessed his niece's true intentions, stating that someone of her noble birth could never marry a bastard of impure blood. If he didn't want to get involved, he handed the decision over to me, and I agreed to the proposal. However, Adolf was the first to object. To resolve this, he decided to personally test whether I was truly qualified to be a son-in-law of his family. In this world, children are born with 8-pack abs, not only as hard as steel and impervious to blades, but even the girl destined to become the most powerful mage was completely captivated by my 8-pack abs, so he shamelessly asked his uncle To for a family alliance. Unbeknownst to him, Adolf was merely obsessed with rubies and hadn't considered Cam's true feelings. He decided to arrange a betrothal between Cam and the eldest son of the Baskerville family. Cam, a man 17 years his senior, simply couldn't accept this, especially since the person he loved was right in front of him. Yet when Adolf learned that a noble princess was to marry an illegitimate child, he was the first to object. Unless Cam could pass his test of strength, I agreed without hesitation. After all, Cam was among the top in the empire in both looks and strength. The scene shifts, and the two of us arrive at the contempt arena. Adolf chants 3 magical incantations, conjuring a teapot out of thin air. He boasts that he will duel me while holding the teapot, and if even a single drop of water spills from it, he'll concede. I know full well that Adolf's strength, my chances of winning in a head-on clash were 10%. An assassination sneak attack, they rose to 50%. But I suspect Father accepted this lopsided challenge precisely to build up his current strength. That makes things much simpler. I just need to meet Father's expectations. I immediately drew my sword and charged forward. Suddenly Camus warned me. You absolutely must not confront his uncle head on. It turned out, Adolf had long since devised a strategy against swordsmen, using a defensive shield spell with extraordinary resilience. Ordinary swords simply couldn't shatter it. Immediately afterward, he chanted the flame spell, and massive fireballs began to coalesce above his head. But just as he was about to hurl them at me, Camus rebuked him for using unnecessary magic. This left Adolf unsure of which side to take. Even so, my memories from a past life told me that Adolf wasn't invincible. If I could exploit his two weaknesses, I could easily make him let his guard down, and even kill him. With that, I swung my sword and launched a relentless barrage of the magical shield. Seeing this, Adolf urged him not to waste his efforts. Magic of this caliber, even if wielded by a genius, could never be broken by a mere weapon. Yet, the moment he finished speaking, a crack actually appeared in the shield. Adolf was deeply impressed by my focus. I had managed to land 23 precise strikes and hit the exact same spot. 23. After I delivered the final blow, my sword shattered under the pressure. Little did they know, this was the final step in my plan. I saw my father and Camus standing nearby, just a step away. At that moment, Adolf, who had been muttering that I wasn't strong enough to marry his niece, suddenly had water dripping from the teapot on his head. This meant I had passed the strength test. A fiery glow, he shot me a look of admiration. After all, he never would have imagined that letting his guard down upon seeing my broken sword would be the biggest mistake that cost him the match. Calm was flushed with excitement. Without realizing it, the rivalry between us, who had known each other for only 2.5 minutes, had already been set in stone. The marriage alliance meant for the family's peaceful coexistence. 7 years passed quickly. On the training grounds of Baskerville, the once tender children had transformed into spirited teenagers. Looking at their sharp gazes, one could tell they had become fully fledged hunting dogs. At this moment, they were working together to hunt down an A-class ox bear, the final exam determining whether they would graduate successfully. Meanwhile, Sanshaji, whose bonds I had once shattered, should have lost himself and spent the rest of his days in ruin. Yet he had unknowingly become my little enigma. Now, he plays a significant role in team operations. Originally, his was already strong. I had simply forced a change in the direction of their evolution. After a 70-minute siege, the bull bear finally exhausted all its strength, leaving it to face the finishing blows of the hunting pack. With this hunting experience, each of them has reached the minimum level of an expert. As of now, their 7-year training has come to an end. However, the instructor still reminded them that there is difference wild bull bears and those kept in cages. So, when facing any monsters they had previously defeated, they must always remain on high alert, because death can occur far more easily than one might imagine. After exchanging a final salute, everyone began to consider their future paths. Within the Baskerville family, there are 7 major knightly orders, each with its own specific duties: reconnaissance, defense, assassination, and so on. After much deliberation, I chose the hunting dog order from my previous life. I have now reached the level of a Grand Master. Although over these 7 years, I have merely progressed from a low level to a Grand Master. Compared to my previous self, this already surpasses the strength I possessed at age 40. Just then, the butler suddenly appeared and joyfully informed me that my father wanted to speak with me. At that moment, I already had the answer in my heart. My first mission at age 15 was likely confirmed. The scene shifted. My father, whom I hadn't seen in 7 years, was sitting before me. I quickly noticed something was off, and asked him about the scar on his face. He touched his face and said meaningfully, "This was left by a Manchu female archer from the Crimson Black Lands." I returned the favor with a look of my own, but regardless, I had to congratulate him on successfully graduating and becoming a qualified hound. Yet, my father's next words left me unsettled for a long time. In my previous life, for 40 years, I had either been on the battlefield or carrying out assassinations. As a bastard, this was the only treatment I could expect. It was simply impossible for me to enjoy the same elite-level management and training as the pure-blooded children. I never imagined that the next court my father proposed this time would actually be part of the elite class, and that he had decided to let me go there to try my hand at it. It seems my father's character has truly changed in this life. He no longer looks at bloodlines but at achievements. Currently, my accomplishments have already surpassed those of an 18-year-old, which is why my father is granting me this special treatment. However, before I can take on the role of this magistrate, I must borrow a huge sum of money. Originally, I thought he'd give it some thought before deciding, but to my surprise, he stamped his approval without a second thought, and even said he'd trust me not to do anything foolish. As I was preparing to leave, the butler decided to share some honest words with me. Because of my extraordinary talent, the head of the house holds me in high regard and cherishes me. He hopes I'll do my absolute best to complete this mission. After all, before heading to the battlefield, my authority as a magistrate will be significantly enhanced. Perhaps even surpassing some purebloods. Hearing this, my face instantly darkened. Let's save that conversation for later. Right now, I'm not sure if I'm up to the task of being a magistrate. Although this is definitely a good thing for me, I can use it to hone my skills. I have absolutely no interest in governance. In any case, I can't forget the thrill of risking my life for money. You despicable Hugo, just you wait. I'll make sure you experience it firsthand. 99% are rich kids, simply because they have a special law. No matter who you are, as long as you follow the laws set by the state, you can obtain supreme wealth. And the little girl standing before me just pulled out the wooden stick stuck in the ground, following the magistrate's orders, and immediately received a reward of 10 billion gold coins. Since I arrived in Baskerville, the most corrupt city, the people there have basically lost faith in life. Even the magistrate has been replaced 70 or 80 times in a single month. But now that it's my turn to serve as this magistrate, the city will be transformed, rising to become one of Baskerville's leading cities. The person standing beside me now is my future assistant, Wei Qi. In the city of extreme wealth disparity, he stands as the most vivid representative of the poor. Though he yearns to change the city's current state, he is constantly stabbed in the back by the scheming lady lurking behind him. Meanwhile, I am examining the various provisions in the law book. Virtually every clause contains minor loopholes, which has led to the emergence of numerous illegal enterprises. Even underground criminal organizations operate above the law. I told Whitekey that I would not amend the existing laws, but would draft a new one based on his proposals, promising to shut down all illegal enterprises within a week. However, given my youth, few commoners would likely believe such a bold declaration. Therefore, I must stage a performance to ensure everyone living here would obey me. The next day, I ordered Wei Qi to issue a notice announcing the new decree, summoning everyone to the city center. As they looked at the new administrator, whose facial hair hadn't even fully grown in, yet the crowd below let out murmurs of contempt. But I couldn't afford to care about that. I had called this emergency meeting today specifically to persuade them. At that moment, I was explaining the existing decrees behind me, stating that we would enforce, and even more strictly than before, anyone who violates them will be held fully accountable. At this point, the crowd stopped believing me. Past experience had taught them that new officials were nothing more than figureheads, who eventually gave up and let things fall apart. Wei Qi immediately reprimanded those making reckless remarks, and upon hearing this, several of them fell silent at once. Given the current situation, I actually wanted to hand this position over to Wei Qi. It would be far more effective than standing here under the scorching sunnies, far more effective than speaking. Then I pulled out a wooden stick. Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, I exerted all my strength and drove the stick into the ground. This was the prelude to the new decree I was about to issue. Special Decree, Article 1. Whoever can pull this stick out will receive a reward of 100 billion gold coins. Instantly, everyone in the square gasped in amazement. After all, 1 billion was 40,000 times the average monthly wage. They began to suspect I was targeting the greedy and corrupt, that there was no way I could possibly pay out that much money. Just then, a little girl raised her hand. She told me she wanted to give it a try. An old man standing nearby tried to dissuade her, warning her not to do something so foolish. But, as the saying goes, fools have their own luck. Her mother was seriously ill and in desperate need of money. So, she had to seize this opportunity. Staring at the weapon at my waist, the girl fell deep in thought. If, as others claimed, the reward was a lie, and she would be executed, who would take care of her mother? It was a serious question. But the little girl couldn't hesitate. Since she had come up on stage, she had to obey the rules. Otherwise, she would face severe punishment. She couldn't afford to think about that now. Crouching down, she gripped the wooden pole tightly with both hands. Mei Chengxiang merely gave it a light and yanked it out. At that moment, not only was the little girl completely dumbfounded, but even the crowd below stood frozen in place. A murderous aura radiated from my entire body, for I knew that when a person's expectations are at their peak, having them plummet to rock bottom in an instant is excruciating. So I pretended to pull out the accessory from my waist. Upon seeing this, the crowd held their breath. At this point, there was no way for them to ease their anxiety. And out of fear, he closed his eyes tightly and waited silently for his execution. But to everyone's surprise, the very next second, I actually produced a bag of gold coins. However, this was not the full amount I would have my guards deliver the remainder to him within the day. Then I ruffled the little girl's hair and told the crowd that this was the benefit they could enjoy by following the special decree. In the days that followed, the percentage of lawbreakers in the city dropped from 80% to 50%. However, this was not the result I had hoped for. I wanted 99%. Because this method was originally implemented by Camus in a past life. However, due to his volatile temperament after taking office, even though he enacted this decree, he never gained the people's affection. Suddenly, Weiqi covered his eyes and wept uncontrollably. In truth, from the moment he first saw me, he had looked down on me. But now, on only my second day in office, I had achieved such remarkable results. He was truly deeply impressed, and swore to the heavens that, from now on, he would follow closely my side from now on. However, I told Weiqi not to get too excited too soon, because the real battle has only just begun. Immediately, I drew dozens of crosses on the map. These were the locations of the black forces. Looking at the map, Weiqi was astonished. Although he was well aware of a few of these factions, he was still quite surprised by the sheer number of others. He asked me how I had managed to uncover such a surprising amount of information. I pointed to my nose and said, "I didn't investigate at all. I just relied on my nose." But just then, a servant suddenly arrived to report that the regional association had invited me to attend an important meeting. However, having just taken office, I wasn't aware that the regional association was an organization established by 7 cunning indigenous clans. Although it's officially listed as a qualification, it's really just a promiscuous entertainment club. Upon hearing this, the corners of my mouth curled up slightly. It seems these vermin have already begun to stir. This is a stick worth 10 billion. If you can pull it out as required, you'll immediately receive a gold coin reward from the state. Because in regions with such a vast wealth gap, the number of poor people forced to break the law is simply beyond count. But all of this is the doing of those rich people and their illicit businesses. So to achieve national peace and prosperity, we must root out the black market. However, before I could even make my move, people claiming to be from the Regional Autonomous Association couldn't contain themselves and actually extended an invitation to me. Meanwhile, the association members were leisurely throwing a party to celebrate the new governor's arrival. Whether it was alcohol or beautiful women, they were going all out. As scions of wealthy families, they certainly have money. But, in reality, all of this was prepared specifically for me. The moment I arrived to accept their invitation, they would put the lives of thousands to force me to pay for this massive expense out of my own pocket. At that moment, the leader, a blonde-haired man, began mocking the Baskerville family, calling them nothing but dogs who only know how to exploit others. He claimed that years ago, when he had a conflict with a certain family, the Baskervilles had actually stood up for him, engaging in a real showdown with the other side, and personally wiping out every member of that family. But, just as the group was discussing the news, the redhead standing nearby noticed something amiss. A stranger had entered the room. When the waiter realized they didn't know me at all, he grabbed my hair and tried to force me out. But in the very next second, in the blink of an eye, I twisted his arm 90 degrees. I then strode forward and announced to everyone that I was the new magistrate. So I demanded to know why they had summoned me. Seeing this, the group not only ignored me, but even began chatting among themselves. I slammed my hand down on the table and unleashed 40% of my magical power. Instantly, hundreds of glasses of red wine, infused with magic, couldn't withstand the force and shattered. Only after this commotion did they realize the gravity of the situation. They had truly picked the wrong person to cross. Although the new governor was indeed 15 years old, there was no mistake about that. But based on my current strength, even if they were all at the level of ultimate experts, they might not be able to defeat me even if they all attacked together. Afterward, I walked over to Red Hair, confronted him, asking if he had lured me here just to make me pay for today's fire. Based on my memories from my previous life, people, like them, love to bully newly appointed magistrates this way. Red Hair stammered, not knowing what to say, but Blonde Muscle immediately answered my question, stating that they dare to do such a thing. The real purpose of inviting me was to test my integrity. After all, corruption is rampant in the city right now. If the new magistrate is easily bribed, they'll lodge a complaint with their superiors and demand a replacement. Obviously, I knew he was just making it up. Since that was the case, I had no choice but to take action. I immediately landed a powerful punch to Red Hair's abdomen and kindly reminded him that even the most loyal dog cannot fully obey their master. After I had him pinned under my foot, I asked the others why I had suddenly struck him. If they didn't know they could expect the same fate as him, naturally, to avoid being beaten, they answered that they were well aware of the situation. But what he didn't know was that regardless of whether they answered yes or no, I was going to beat the crap out of them anyway. Because my purpose in coming here today was to wipe out this district's self-governance association. After that, they could no longer hold back. They thought their combined numbers were enough to overwhelm me, but they still underestimated my strength. Today, I was going to teach these disobedient bastards a lesson. After the beating, I locked them all in a cage. I saw that the blonde-haired one still had a trace of arrogance left, shouting that once he got out, he would definitely take my head. I casually replied that I would feed them to the mermaids. That way, even the King of Heaven himself could find any evidence. Instantly, the cages were filled with pleas for mercy. Go, standing nearby, tried to dissuade me after gauging the situation, but if he'd gone through what I had, he wouldn't have spouted such nonsense. Yet the punishment wasn't over yet, because something even more thrilling awaited these guys. Just then, a bald man suddenly walked in. He was the judge of this prison. And the various torture devices he brought with him were the very ones I had commissioned him to create. He even remarked that, in his 30 years as a judge, he had never seen such cruel instruments. At the very first glance, he could only vomit. So now, what I am about to do is use these tools to make those nobles who still refuse to confess their crimes experience torment and suffer pain akin to a living hell. Afterward, this incident quickly spread as a rumor. Some people believed in my rule. After all, I could spend 10 million gold coins without a second thought, and punishing a few lawbreakers was hardly out of line. Others, however, suspected I was merely staging a charade. They reasoned that once high-ranking members of the indigenous clans intervened, even the governor would have to release them. This group was indeed correct, but only partially so. Not only did those indigenous clans come personally to apologize, but they also offered vast quantities of gold, ashush money. With this, the few people I had detained would certainly have to be released, but I made no guarantees as to whether those released would emerge unscathed. Since this incident, the number of poor people violating the laws has dropped to nearly zero. Currently, the only ones left are the nobles. So I reminded Weichi that he would soon be participating in another plan and must stay on high alert. The scene shifts to a marketplace for trading monsters. Although the signboard claims it deals only in monsters, the market is actually mixed with slaves and commoners. To bring down the shadowy criminal organization pulling the strings behind the scenes, my plan is to have Weichi act as the seller, while I disguise myself as a slave to be sold. Only a handful of nobles enjoy the privileges of rulers. To rescue the shadowy criminal organization, I've disguised myself as a slave and infiltrated the police.